So let's get started. What the fuck is non-binary? Well,
non-binary is a person whose experience of gender does not fit within the binary of man or woman, or in other words, someone whose gender is neither male nor female. Non-binary people can present in any way and use any pronouns. Here are some famous ones. It's called that because it describes a gender that doesn't fall into the binary of man and woman, but instead into a continuous space where different people can fit closer to one end or to the other of the spectrum, or somewhere in the middle, or neither. It's a spectrum.
So the earliest use of non-binary seems to be around the year 2000. Or was it the 80s? No, the 70s or 60s. Or 50s. It was referenced in a study 20 years ago, but it was also referenced by an obscure artist in the 50s. Someone's grandmother whispered it to a friend at a counter of a butcher's in a shop in northeast London in 1932. As I've learned when researching this video, no one seems to know for sure. As someone who became an emo kid when he left school at 16 in early 2005, hung around with loads of emos, rockers, goths, scene kids, and none of us had ever met anyone who identified as or even heard the word non-binary. I'm not saying it hasn't been around for a while. It's just, it was really unknown. I even spoke to American teens back in the day and no one had heard of it, right? And this is pretty much where it started. So it seems it's only really taken hold with the birth of Gen Z using social media, because how it was 10 years ago is so far removed from what it is now. But we've been told they've been around since ancient times because some cultures have a third gender. This wouldn't explain why only Western cultures have adopted this idea, because you certainly don't have people where these third genders existed running around nowadays with dyed hair screaming, "If you don't call me they them, you are invalidating my humanity." We are of course led to believe that the reason we don't have this happening in places like India is because they wouldn't be allowed to, which is a complete crock of shite. Trans people do exist in India, so their argument there is already flawed. Going back to around a decade ago, much like today, alternative people did not fit the stereotype of what it means to be a man or a woman. For example, you could boil it down to men like beer, and football, and recreational fighting on the street, outside my window at 1 a.m. in the fucking morning. And women like cats, and rom-coms involving Ryan Gosling, and crying. But I wasn't a stereotypical man, so I liked crying and rom-coms involving Ryan Gosling. Oh, and I used to wear eyeliner. But the thing about alternative people around a decade ago is this: we recognise the stereotype by saying things like, "I don't feel like I'm a man, and I don't feel like I'm a woman," or "I'm a feminine man who likes musicals and sewing," etc. But we never said, "I am not a man and I am not a woman and I'm not male or female," because that's ridiculous. We fought against the mainstream. We were happy with that. We liked it. We had our own little groups. We were cool. We had teenage angst and long hair, and it was, do you know what? It was fucking brilliant. Because a lot of people like that are more open-minded. We were both non-conforming in society and gender. That was fine. No one really cared. There were the odd comments now and then that I got from people in a pub, mainly guys going, "Oh, why are you wearing eyeliner?" And then I'd reply with something like, "Because I am, and I like it. It's kind of the whole style." And then they would respond with things like, "Oh, okay." That was it. I mean, one time I got asked if I was gay, which I said no. I just like wearing eyeliner. It's like the modern trendy thing. Plus, I'm an emo kid, and the response was, "Oh, okay." No offence taken. So people who identify as non-binary don't just recognise the stereotype, they uphold it. Because their idea of what a man or woman is has to be the stereotype and nothing beyond that. It's so fucking archaic. I cannot critically think far enough to understand how anyone can think like a non-binary person does. It blows my mind, truly. And to be honest, I don't even know how this stereotype became upheld. Because going back 20 years ago, millennials like myself were fighting what it meant to be a man or woman. New terms came out. One about the modern man who looked after himself. I don't know if some of you remember that. Maybe he wore eyeliner, maybe he did his hair all nice. Metrosexual, they called it. And some of us thought it was a bit weird. I personally thought, he's just a man. Like, he's not the stereotype of a man, but he's a man, and that's fine. Men are a spectrum. Here's the kicker, and one of the things that makes me hate the idea of non-binary so much, the spectrum is within the binary, not outside it. But all of this quickly disappeared in favour of saying this modern man wasn't a man at all. He had transcended gender, which at this point had split away from meaning the same thing as sex. You know what I want to know? Where have all the goths and emos gone? You could argue it's not dangerous, but I would disagree. Never before in society have we experienced a social contagion which all but removed most of the alternative subculture and replaced the entire philosophy of you don't conform to gender stereotypes and that's fine to the stereotype is the law, and unless you deconstruct gender in the first place, you're gonna have a shitty life. The media promotes it, adults promote it, there's non-binary influencers, but actual transgender people with gender dysphoria are all over the political spectrum, from left, right to centre. But there's no centrist or right-wing people who identify as non-binary, and if there is, it's extremely rare. It is nothing but a left-wing subculture. And another thing, homosexual people have been categorically persecuted since the dawn of fucking time. Let me just say this. If they're in the closet, as we say, and they come out to the family members and society and whatnot, good for them. What really annoys me is how people who identify as non-binary say they're coming out as non-binary. Hang on a minute, you're telling me that you're co-opting the same language as people who've been persecuted for decades and hundreds of years and all this shit, right? And all you've got to do is just say, oh, don't really feel like a man. Are you fucking serious? And don't even get me started on they, them pronouns. I'll get to the pronoun chat at a later date, but I will say this. Yes, we use they and them when we don't know the gender of the person, but that was created at a time where sex and gender, and to most of us normal people still are, the same thing. If I don't know the sex of someone, I will say they. That does not mean that you can then use they, them just because you've decided that you don't want to be classed as man or woman. That's not how language works. You're using that language for ideological purposes. Therefore, only people who believe in gender identity believe in what you believe and believe that they then can be used in that sense. Most of society don't. So we're not going to. That doesn't make us bigots. That just makes us appreciative of language and logic. I don't think anyone should ever support the idea of non-binary. I think it's narcissistic. I think it's disingenuous to people who suffer from gender dysphoria and transition. There are many transgender people, mainly millennial transgender people, who are deeply offended by the idea of non-binary. And that is why it's very important to never, ever, ever, in any society around the world, let non-binary be a legal identity. It's pretty much a religious belief. It follows that structure, except without a deity. There's no trans god that they pray to. I mean, if they did, it would certainly make it a lot easier to ignore, because then I could be like, well, I definitely don't believe in your trans god. Although there is an argument to say that God is probably trans. That will piss off the conservatives. Sake. This is a really shitty argument from my side, and I'm not some eco-warrior, but non-binary people are kind of helping to kill the planet a bit more. If you think about it, they are the exact reason that we now have on paper forms extra ink saying gender or like preferred gender, whereas it used to just say sex, M or F. Right? Or gender, M or F. We was all happy with that. And now it's preferred gender, and it's a fucking big list. Although luckily we do a lot of stuff online nowadays, so go paperless. Yeah. But mainly for me, it's about what it was like for me growing up, being young, bullied, disenfranchised, not knowing where I fitted into the world, and knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it doesn't involve being part of what is essentially a cult. with cult-like behaviour, which ignores critical thinking and ignores reality for the sake of feeling happier. You could do all that, like I did, and not be part of this weird movement. Fuck that. Seriously. For those of you who are wondering, I am left-wing. I always have been, I always will be. However, my views span the political spectrum. I have some views on the right, some views on the left. But if you want to follow along to a channel that's going to be social commentary that actually tries to make a difference rather than being stuck in the echo chamber, please, for the love of fuck, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, and let's see where this journey takes us. I'm done. Good night.